Hi, everyone. I'm Rex Aldana, and we're back with our podcast number 34, I believe, uh, talking with Gered Mankowitz, who should need no introduction to anybody who knows about rock and roll photography. But my friend Mark Stevens, hi, Mark. He's my
All right.
co-podcaster here, and hi, Gered.
I
I'll
And
let you
get
speak, Mark.
where are we talking to you from? Are you in London?
No, I'm at home in deepest Cornwall.
Okay.
Wow.
All right.
Oh, okay.
All right. So we're on lots of different time zones. I know that. And we've been trying to have a podcast with you. And I looked this up the other day when I was trying to email you since 2023, which shocked me because time flies very easily, apparently. But I think at some point I had a health issue, and then Rex had a health issue, and you had some. So we've tried to do this for a while, but actually I think it's working because you have, or it's coming out, a brand new book, 335-page book,
Wow.
Gered
Yeah.
Mankowitz, Photographs. It's called Photographs.
I
Foreword
know.
by Annie Lennox, of course, that called Our Eye, of course. Um, and you were very nice to send us both a digital copy of that book
Yes,
to
thank you for that.
podcast. It's an incredible book,
Mhm.
absolutely astonishing,
Thank
really,
you.
really well done. Not just the photographs, but what you wrote throughout the book about sessions, about people. It's really just incredible. Congratulations on the book.
Oh, well, thank you. That's really kind of you. Very few people have seen it so far because it's not officially published until May the 12th. But thank you, guys. I really appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a huge labor of love, sweat, and tears. um, and I'm very proud of it. I'm very pleased. It's a book I've wanted to do for a while because I wanted to try and get across in my 80th year to try and put together a sort of portrait of what a 65-year career in photography might look like. And so I wanted to cover all aspects of the career, not just the music, although of course the music dominates the book. But I wanted to try and cover everything, just dip into some areas and go into other areas a little deeper. But I'm really pleased you like it. And then I wanted to try and write. I don't consider myself to be a writer at all. I struggle with writing, but I felt that I could express something sort of personal and hopefully authentic about my own feelings and experiences of taking these pictures and working with these marvelous people.
Amazing.
Yeah, it really is well done. How long does it take to do a book like this? When did you start on this?
Well, that's an interesting question because, in a way, I think you start a book like this in your head. And quite a long while ago. And then I, I work with a company in London called Iconic Images Limited, and they work very closely with a marvelous publisher called ACC Art Books. And I'd worked with ACC on a book I did on the Rolling Stones with Terry O'Neill a few years ago called Breaking Stones. And I was hoping that we might work towards a retrospective book. And then about 2.5 years ago, it came up and I was asked, what sort of book do I want to do? And I said, I really want to do a complete career retrospective. And they went, right, go ahead. And the only thing that James, the publisher, said to me was that he wants it to be chronological, which is not an obvious thing. I've done books before which aren't chronological because publishers have been fearful of putting all the 60s stuff together, thinking that it was the 60s stuff that was going to sell the book.
Mm.
And so they spread it all around. And I wouldn't say it didn't work. I think it worked. But this book had to be chronological. It's the whole point of it is to go from decade to decade.
You said something astonishing a minute ago, and I know this from reading the book, but you're talking about your 80th birthday, but you said a 65-year career. Now, I'm doing a little bit of math here.
Well,
You started really early in
yeah.
your photography
Well,
career.
well, I wanted to bring up, Garrett, that I read that at 15 you received an apprenticeship from another photographer who noticed your work. And by age 17 or 18, I believe, you were already working with the Rolling Stones and had done some other photography like there was something you did in 62 called Fiorello, a play that you went and
Yes.
photographed. And I think by 17 you were already involved photographing with the music industry. And this was with, and forgive me if I'm not correct, but I read this, you dropped out of high school and no college, right? Is that correct?
No qualifications whatsoever. I've never sat an exam in my life.
I think that's commendable that you avoided the institutions and you did it without the institutions. Good for you.
Well, I had a lot of parental support. I must add that my parents were supporting me and were encouraging me. I mean, they thought that I was a dunce academically, so they felt that to support me into further education was a lost cause, and I was showing a natural aptitude to photography. So we all headed down that road, and this is what's happened 65 years later.
That's amazing. I I just think it's wonderful that that happened to you.
Oh, thank you. That's
That the
kind
way
of you.
that that happened. I mean,
And you,
Yes.
that doesn't happen to a lot of people.
No, but it's interesting you say that. I tell you, I was executive producer on a series that we made about rock photography called Icons Music Through the Lens, which is on PBS in America still, if PBS still exists, it is anyway. Um,
Well, its funding doesn't exist, but
Um, and the number of young photographers, music photographers, who started really young. Bob Gruen was I think 14 or 15, and several others made a point of how young they were. And I think it was because in those days, the only way to start in music was to go to a concert and take pictures. And so they'd smuggle cameras, they'd take a lens off, put it in a sock and put something, and then they'd put it together and zoom down to the front and take pictures until they were thrown out. So although, yes, I was very young, and I was certainly very young to have my own studio and very young to start a commercial career. But funnily enough, several really great music photographers started very young also.
there's also an interesting part in your book where it was the actor Peter Sellers
Oh,
who
yeah.
got you interested. He's a friend of your father's. He came by the house, and you learned, or you became fascinated with photography that day, correct?
Well, I'd already been sort of interested in photography, not taking pictures, but just the mechanics of photography, because by then, late 50s, my dad had become pretty successful, and we were photographed as a family. Indeed, the man who I was going to apprentice with later on was one of the photographers who'd come and taken photographs of us at home. And I was always the kid I had three other brothers, I was the eldest. I was always the pushy one who'd come up and ask the photographer impertinent questions and asked to look through the camera and why is it like this and why are you doing that and why do you put the light up so high? All that stuff. So I had this sort of interest in the mechanics of it. And then one day my dad was working on a film project with Peter Sellers, and he came down to have Sunday lunch with us. And Sellers was an incredibly enthusiastic and, of course, extremely wealthy amateur photographer. And he arrived with a full Hasselblad 500C medium format camera kit and a huge, great Polaroid 110A, which was a very early commercially available Polaroid camera, commercially available in America. We'd never seen anything like it. It made 5 by 4 inch Polaroids, quite big, and was huge. And you opened it up and pulled the lens down on a bellows, and it was quite special. Right. And he proceeded to start taking photographs of me and my brother, Jonathan, apparently standing in my hand like Tom Thumb, because he just finished making Tom Thumb in Hollywood. And as we waited for this Polaroid to develop, he started counting down in an insane comedy voice. I mean, really completely bonkers. And we were hysterical with laughter. We were weeping with laughter as he counted down. Then he peeled open the Polaroid, and there was this magical image of me holding my brother Jonathan in my hand. And that was it. Something clicked. And then it was all sort of tied off when he showed me the Hasselblad. And I don't know, your listeners might not know what a Hasselblad is. So I'll very briefly, if I may, a Hasselblad is a Swedish-built medium format camera, considered by many as the finest of its type in the world. A beautiful piece of engineering, magnificent lenses, and it's a system whereby you have quite a small body, and then you put lenses and magazines and viewfinders and everything, and you create a camera, a bespoke camera. And he was doing this, showing me this, but he was doing it in a sort of mad Swedish chef voice. And I was just, overwhelmed. I was laughing and weeping and overwhelmed with it. Anyway, he goes off, and my dad says to me, well, how was that for you? And I said, it was fantastic, Dad. I want to be a photographer, and I want to have a Hasselblad.
Did you have a Hasselblad?
Yeah, I got a Hasselblad when I was 15. But yeah.
If people have listened to this podcast before, or they keep up with me, they know that I'm fascinated by the what ifs in life. And that's one of my favorite what if stories, because if Peter Sellers hadn't come by that day, would your life have been completely different? I don't know.
I don't know either. I really don't. I mean, who knows? But I think that, anyway, thank goodness he did. Yeah. And I did. And that's that. Yes.
Absolutely.
Well, I just thought I'd show, this is the cover of the book. Well,
yes, Gered Mankowitz. It's inspired title.
Yes. It's a perfectly fine title. The photograph is, I guess, an outtake from the Between the Buttons Rolling Stones. Yeah, because that's not quite the same album cover, is it? No.
No, it's not. I call it Smiling Buttons.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. The original Between the Buttons photograph was lost. Decca Records in London. Okay, step back briefly. Back in those days, all record covers, magazine covers were reproduced from the original transparencies. Nobody made duplicates, nobody made copies, and nobody returned them back to the photographer. And we all thought, none of us policed that action because I thought that I'd taken that photograph to be on that cover. That's it. It's done its job. It's not going to mean anything after this moment. Nobody imagined in their wildest dreams that the Rolling Stones would be around for 3 years, let alone 300. We didn't look after this stuff. We really didn't look after this material. And so when I began to pull my archive together, I began to pull in all these photographs that I had, and I realized that I had very, very few pictures of the Between the Buttons session, but that one, Between the Smiling Buttons, is one of my all-time favorites because they are smiling and they look great. And right. I think actually for me, maybe not for Stones fans, for me it's better than the cover image.
Yeah, and you mentioned in some of your writings that the band liked you because you photographed them as they were themselves, not in some sort of artificed way or constructed way. Is that correct?
Well, I tried to. You see, for me, the subject's always the hero, and if they're not with you in spirit and heart, then your picture isn't going to have that extra little bit of value, extra meaning, extra level of communication that you need. So I've never tried to manipulate people into doing things that I think will make a great picture, but might not actually be appropriate. Now, I mean, I think I probably have done on occasion. I'm sure I have done, because like all photographers, I've been in situations where people perhaps have needed a little bit of manipulation in order to get the best out of them. But with the Stones, you see, one of their great strengths for me was that they looked like a gang. They looked like five individuals with individual identities. And the thing about the Stones is you could mix them up. You could put Brian in the front, Mick at the back, Mick at the front, Charlie on the side. You could mix them up and they'd always look great. They'd always look good. And they understood how to make every role within your composition work. You put Mick in the back and you can't miss him. You put Mick at the front and you can't, they know how to make it work. And all I did was to create shapes, compositions that gave them those opportunities, those spaces, and encouraged them to fill them.
You must have always felt, and tell me if I'm wrong, you must have always felt very comfortable doing in your own skin to be working with some of these people. Again, you may be working with them before they're very famous, but artists in any sense, musicians, actors eventually, of course. So would you say that? Have you always been very comfortable in your skin and leading people or talking to them about what you're going to do?
I think I've always felt I think I've always felt quite comfortable talking to people. I'm not sure whether I've ever felt really comfortable in my own skin, but what I think happens is I made a decision very early on when I realized that I wasn't any good at street photography. I wasn't any good at grabbing a photograph. I wasn't a reportage photographer. I realized that I had to try and get my subjects to commit to having their picture taken, to come to me. And I think I would never have worked with the Stones the way I did if I wasn't there, part of the team. I was always part of the team. I was always on their side. That's mattered to me. That made a big difference to me. And I think that in that context, I felt quite confident and quite comfortable. The other thing is that you don't have an ego when you're with lots of other egos. It's not really about me. I think the photographer has to not slip into the background, but you have to, you can't assert yourself in a way. A big person. I mean, a lot of photographers have big personalities. Of course they do, and I'm sure they're absolutely brilliant. But for me, I never wanted to get in the way of my subjects. I never wanted to. I'm not competing with them. I'm not a competitive person. I want to work with them.
I want to go through your book has so many people, so many photographs, and I was trying to write down some notes of the people in your book, and it took me about a page, and I hadn't even got. I mean, we're talking. You're most famous, the Rolling Stones and Kate Bush. You're very famous for them, Jimi Hendrix. But I'm going to go through just a few. Marianne Faithfull, the Hollies, Paul McCartney, Joe Cocker, Eric Clapton, the Yardbirds, Cat Stevens, Phil Collins, Slade, ABC, Susie Quattro, Adam Ant, Ultravox, Kiki D, Bing Crosby, Joan Jett, Duran Duran, Randy Newman, Wham, Cliff Richard, Oasis, Elton John, Billy Idol, Genesis, Kim Wilde. And then there's, the actors, and there's this great story you've got about Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. Noel Coward is there. And we won't go all through it, but when people get the book, that's a great story about them. So, I mean,
I wanted to bring that up actually about Boom.
Okay, well, go ahead.
Anybody who knows about cinema history knows about Boom, and I think it's considered like one of the biggest misfires of all time. But your description of their behavior on set was very interesting. Talk about egos, huh? That must have been something really hard to navigate and be in that situation.
It is because it is. I think John Waters loves Boom, doesn't he?
Yes, he says it's like, I think, one of the greatest movies. And I like it as well. I mean, it's just something, it's fascinating to watch. That's all I say. It's just fascinating to watch.
It was an extraordinary clash of egos at every possible level. It was amazing. It was the film that really put me off movies. I mean, being making movies or being working within the movie industry. I mean, everybody had, even the set designer ego was absolutely enormous. The lighting cameraman, although he was a very quiet, diffident chap, somehow his ego
Wow.
overwhelmed the set when everybody was desperate for him to finish the lighting. Yeah, and it was, and of course Taylor and Burton. It was absolutely, I mean, magnificent egos, gone completely mad and out of control. And I had a big problem because Elizabeth took against me, which wasn't really too surprising. I mean, she let me.
Right?
Sorry?
Before you even got there.
Yeah, well, she was
Right.
putting up barriers, but we got over those, and I arrived. But she made it very clear that she wasn't going to be my friend, whereas Richard was much friendlier, and then that in itself creates a slight problem. You have to tiptoe because you can't be seen to be too chummy with Richard. That will alienate Elizabeth. And oh my God, it was so complicated. And of course, the worst thing was it was such a struggle to get good pictures. So in the end, that's really, I mean, of course, it was great fly on the wall stuff. It was marvelous on many different levels. I loved the experience, but taking the photographs, it was terribly frustrating and not me at all.
Wow.
Fascinating story. That's what I'm talking about. This is a book of your photography, but the stories that come along with them, they're so good. They're so interesting
They are.
throughout the book. You just love this book. How many do you? These are the weird kind of questions that you kind of, when you've done this kind of in a career, but you really have no concept of how many photos you've taken over the years, do you? At this point, I mean, you're just tens of thousands of photos, I'm assuming.
Yeah, yes, tens of thousands of photos. I mean, and I'm not a particularly. I don't actually shoot vast amounts of film. I've always been quite a not careful, but considered. I work with a band or somebody in the studio, and we build up whatever it is, a rapport, a set, a feel, an atmosphere, and we work on getting that right. We shoot it and then we move on. I don't, I try not to shoot thousands of pictures of the same thing. I try and get it to a position where I think I've got the shot, and then I move on.
All my family would like me to be that way with them on vacation. Mark takes all these pictures, but they have pictures, but Mark takes the what? Now move over here. So anyway, so we're glad about that. So of course you are on a podcast that's dedicated to Dave Stewart and Annie Lennox, Eurythmics. We started a few years ago. Dave's been on the podcast, enjoyed that. And so we want to talk to you. Again, I listed all of that long list of people that you've photographed, and more and more and more people that I didn't even talk about. But you've had a very long, or you did have a very long career with Eurythmics, or before when they were the Tourists. So we want to go back to that time period. And you have a very famous, hold this up, Reality Effect, the album cover. I saw a video, I think, maybe, I don't know if you posted it or someone else, maybe the gallery posted it with an interview with him. And if there's an iconic piece to the Tourist at all, I think this is probably it.
Yeah.
This photograph that Annie said in this little clip that I'd never seen until just the other day, that what the concept was, as she put it, was sort of an event that the photography was going to happen. What do you remember about that day? Tell us about this that was going to be and is the album cover for the Tourist Reality Effect.
Yeah. Okay. First, if I may, I just want to say that little clip of Annie, that's at the opening of my first ever exhibition, and it just shows you how marvelously supportive Annie and Dave were. You know, she came along and she did an interview for the BBC, and she was there for me, which was just so sweet. And she's been there for me on this book. So, you know, I feel touched that we've had this long relationship. So Reality Effect, well, I'd started working with the Tourists. I think the record company had booked me to shoot a press shoot with them. And I think their single of the Dusty Springfield song, which the title just escapes me.
I only want to be with you.
I only want to be with you, and which I loved. I mean, I loved the song. I loved Dusty, and I loved Annie's version. And I was just so taken with Annie and Dave. They were so creative. The whole band were fantastic. And we did some quite crazy things in the studio with tearing the background and painted backgrounds of American skyscrapers. And yes, thank you. Thank you. And what their endless creativity visually, the way they worked, they were funny, they were fun. We just clicked. And I think it clicked for Annie and Dave as well, because they asked me to do the cover. And as Annie says, an event, the cover concept was actually sort of simple, was to create a white room where everything in it is white, everything, the fruit in the bowl, the floor, the ceiling, the television, the fireplace, the coal in the bucket, it's all white. And the band would each wear a white outfit, different sort of outfit. So Dave is a sort of crazy looking chef, Annie is a bride, one of the other guys is in a sort of jiu-jitsu kung fu outfit. I can't remember everybody's names, forgive me, but another guy is like a sort of a trapeze artist, and and then the idea was that we would give them children's paints, non-toxic paints in 5 primary colors, and that they would very slowly, on my count, they would begin to introduce the paint. So the apple would become green, the banana would become yellow, blah, 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 blah. And we would build up a series of photographs, and that would be it. That was the event. Well, now Annie and I slightly differ on what happened. Let me just say that one of the band was out of it.
Pete Coombs.
I don't know. I don't want to say how or what he was out of it on, but he was out of it. And I didn't know. And I'm sorry, one important aspect of this, I'm lying on my stomach 12 foot above the ground with the camera all braced off, because I'm photographing it from above so that the room is a white canvas. That's the idea, so that the cover is a canvas. And then this guy, and I'm not going to say who it was, although I think it's quite obvious when you see the pictures, but just went whack, and the paint flew across the room, hitting everything and everybody, and blue paint. And of course, then the others just went whack, and yellow came in, and red, and it's going completely crazy. And I'm photographing this, hoping that they're not going to go whack up to me above and cover the lens, or which could have been a disaster. And they just carry on. And I sort of managed to stop them. Whoa. I go, hold on. Let me just get this. It looks fantastic. And then they pose and do something funny, and bang, bang, bang. And then whack, more paint, more. But anyway, that's what happened. It became a sort of living Jackson Pollock madness. And it much better than the original concept. Much more interesting, much more exciting, much more spontaneous. And basically that was it. Fortunately, I'd taken some photographs of everything before the paint. So we had, we had something. I think they used those pictures on singles bags, and oh, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The original, well, the original concept, or the original. Yeah, okay, yeah.
So in the end,
So
everybody was sort of happy with the outcome, even though it wasn't what was originally planned, huh?
yeah, because it was so much better, and I think that's what's so exciting about working with bands. Is that you have to start with an idea, and this was a good idea, and we built the set, and we were right on it, all of us, and the clothes were terrific. But then you get this lovely little out of control element that just throws the whole thing, and it's fantastic. The big problem that they didn't understand, but I was really bothered about, was, as you probably know, as you mix all that paint together, you just get a sludge. All the color goes, and it just becomes a horrible dark sludge. And I was worried about that. And there is a frame somewhere, unfortunately, I lost it, but I'm sure somebody has it somewhere, where one of the guys is lying on the table at the end, and you actually can't see him. I mean, you need to know he's there in order to see it, because he's just completely camouflaged in this sludge.
That's interesting.
Fascinating to how one does now, where you could take all of your pictures that you took that day in a row and put them almost into a video slide or whatever one would call, and see the motion of that happening. How long did this take? I know when apparently Pete Coombs is what the stories have always been.
Oh.
This, as you said, just happened. So how long do you think the entire photo session lasted?
Well, I think the whole photo session lasted quite a while, but I think the actual taking of the photographs probably didn't last much more than about half an hour.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, of the actual painting stuff, because that huge burst of energy and inspiration and creativity just burnt up, in this sort of explosion of energy. It just went. And the funny thing is, our bathroom, where you can imagine these 5 people completely covered. And I managed to grab Annie for a portrait at the end, and she did a marvelous sort of like a sad, rejected bride. Yeah. And I love that picture.
That's a great picture.
Yeah. But I wasn't really able to, everybody was, I think they'd had it, got very high, brilliant, and then they just went, and our bathroom was never the same again. I mean, the bathroom was went from being white to a sort of grubby pink, and remained like that for about 18 months before we could get it together to paint it. It was quite fun.
Your home or your office?
This is in my studio.
In your studio, yeah.
Yeah.
I love the photo, and I'm sorry these are black and white. I only have a black and white printer. The photo that you use in the book is not the actual cover photo, and I love it because, when you look at it, Annie is pouring, in essence, cream into me, and it looks like he's trying to catch it in his mouth. I don't know if he did. I have no idea.
He's pouring it into his mouth.
Was it cream or was it pink? That's the.
You see, I don't have the original transparency. The original transparency, the actual cover image got lost, so I don't have that. But I do have, outtakes that are pretty close to it, and I use those and show those. And if people are going to be pedantic about it, they can buy the cover somewhere.
No, I love the idea of seeing the other.
Yes.
Version. That's just, and when I was looking at it closely, because in my mind, I couldn't have told you exactly what the cover looked like without looking at it. Yeah. But looking at that with the pit, with in essence, the cream coming down, and Jim got his mouth. What a great shot! It's just.
But it's very illustrative of that fantastic sort of degree of creative communication that they all have. Yeah. This was apparent in the early tourist sessions I did. They bounced off each other. some bands would have just torn paper, but they made something of the paper. I mean, Dave tore bits of paper and he made a series of hats. I mean, all during the shoot, like a sailor's hat and then a top hat. I mean, it was endless, that creative energy from them. And it was so attractive, that I just wanted to work with them more and more.
Well, Annie talks about this very event in her foreword to your book. How did it come about, by the way? I know you have a lot of people, including Dave, who comment about you throughout the book. Did you always intend for this to be the foreword, or did you take different things from different artists and you said, that's the one I want to use? How did that
go? To be honest with you, I was just so thrilled to get these contributions and sort of overwhelmed by the responses of the people that I asked. And it was the publisher who said, the Annie Lennox piece is just fantastic. Let's put that, let's ask her if it's okay to use that as the foreword. And that's what we did.
Great publisher you've got then. I want to put something real quick from hers. She says, in any case, it all turned out well in the end. She's talked about, the process of that. And in the end, it makes for a brilliant shared experience / memory. That must be nice to get that from her.
Yeah. It is extraordinary. These people, these huge, talented stars, have extraordinarily complex lives on so many different levels. And the fact that they remember a moment that you shared with them, God knows, 40 odd years ago, is very special. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you continued to work with them going forward. There was a book that came out in the early 80s, and it was called Eurythmics in Their Own Words, which featured a lot of your photographs that were taken, I think, during the tourist period. They were mostly of Dave and Annie doing the poses like this and like
Yes.
this. And I believe that sort of fan magazine was chock full of your photographs. Did you know about that? Were you involved with that?
I don't remember it particularly, but I did, as I said, we did 2 or 3 sessions together that were sort of for us, and they went all everywhere. They went to the fan clubs and the magazines and everything. But they were, Annie made such beautiful shapes. She was, she looked fantastic. She was a chameleon. She was just really, really a special person and a marvelous subject. Yeah. So yeah, it wasn't difficult to get really marvelous photographs of her. Very geometric, And going back to the picture of her on the box with the lights.
Oh yes.
The Christmas lights, which was just a complete thing that just grew out of being at the studio. They were just that box was part of my prop store, and the lights were they were just there, and we built up this sort of ridiculous thing. And she decided to just wear her bra and wrap a bin bag, like a rubbish bag, round as a mini skirt. And I mean, this is like quite a while before Madonna was going around just wearing. I mean, this is sort of cutting edge, innovative fashion rock.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you bring up Madonna, because in those photographs in that book, in their own words, she's got some outfits on that a few years later, when Madonna came out, like for instance, the Lucky Star video by Madonna, that outfit, Annie had kind of similar look in those photos you took years before.
Yeah.
So I find that interesting. And speaking of homages, we wanted to
Yes.
show this. This is Lady Gaga doing an homage to your photo of Annie with the Christmas lights.
I know, which is lovely, isn't it?
Yeah,
Very
it's not as complex as your photo, but
no, it's not, and it doesn't have the drama, does it?
no, exactly.
It's lovely, I love my picture of Annie on the box. One of my favorite pictures I've ever taken of her, or anyone, I think, perhaps.
Oh, really? That's interesting. And then you did the cover for the single of This Is the House.
I did.
which there it is. And
Oh gosh, the 12-inch. You've got the 12-inch. I've only got
oh
I've only
wow.
got the
What
seven
is
inch.
that? What is that you just held up, Garrett? What is that?
That was my version of.
Oh, what a collectible you got there.
Yeah.
So
I
the
wasn't I wasn't sure of how well known that is. That's actually in an underground car park in the centre of London.
I was going to ask you that, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
and every corridor that led out was a different colour. And we sneaked down there with a couple of. I think I've got an assistant right at the end holding a flashlight, and I've got a flashlight on Annie, and we just knocked off these sort of strange, mysterious. Is Dave chasing her, or are they together? It was just another little scenario that Eurythmics create visually, and then. Well, I love we just turned it upside down without
Yeah.
anybody in it for the back cover, and
I know. I always love that as well. I always love that.
and it's strange. It's just strange, yeah.
That is a very stunning photography there, and I've always loved that picture sleeve. I think it's just one of my favorites.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It's an interesting time with them. They've had their time with the Tourist. They had their first album as Eurythmics in the Garden. This is the first single from what will be the Sweet Dreams are made of this album.
Yep.
So from the standpoint of chart success, Eurythmics are still struggling. They're trying to find themselves. The record company is saying, okay, we'll put this single out called This Is the House. Then they're going to do one with The Walk. And they Love is a Stranger, which doesn't do great the first time around. And then, of course, Sweet Dreams. So it was just this fascinating time with them. So you've worked with them at the Tourist. And, of course, with Reality Effect, they had a great deal of success. Just
Yeah.
the band couldn't go on. Eventually, it was too much. But Dave and Annie decided to go on. So you're working with them at this point at a very interesting time for them. They're looking for success, looking for what is this sound that is Dave Stewart and Annie Lennox in this group called Eurythmics. What do you remember about that time and that photo set? And what were their mood? What were they like at that point? I'm just fascinated by that time period.
Well, I remember it as being quite an odd time for them because they were very much independent artists. They had very strong ideas of how they should be and what they want to do and how they should do it. And they were struggling, I think. And I don't know anything about it from a management point of view. I don't even know who was managing them at that moment in time. I just remember, I think they had a sort of quite a ramshackle studio in a part of London called Chalk Farm. And I'd go up there and we'd talk about what we might do. But they didn't have any money, if I remember rightly, and they didn't have any budget because RCA wouldn't give them budgets and wouldn't give them a contract. They'd do it all on a single by single basis, which seems madness now. And guys, I don't know how factually correct that is. That's what I remember. But and so myself and I think two other photographer friends of theirs had agreed to shoot sessions, and offset the charges, hoping that they would get signed and the pictures would get used and we would get paid. Because we wanted to work together, because we were friends and felt extremely sympathetic to them and wanted to support their creative journey. I mean, that it sounds pretentious putting it like that, but I think that was what it was like for me. And it was fun, having fun and working with these clever people is what I've always wanted to do. So it was a no-brainer for me working with them.
I've seen early interviews where she talks a lot. Annie talks about that, and she talks about, well, we have friends who help us, and she often talks about. She may not mention exact but she'll mention a photographer, who might have shot this or shot this, and it did seem like, it was a group of people that and I assume you could see and hear throughout the tourist, and then of course as they were transitioning to Eurythmics before the success, but just how creative those two people were in all aspects of their life. It must have been fascinating to see them at that point.
It really was. And also they were my friends. I felt very much that we were friends, and that Annie and Dave did a couple of shoots for me, for my portfolio, and they did a shoot for the Observer magazine that was a magazine that I contributed to quite regularly, and they did a funny shoot for them. So I think, which was, I think, a way of them giving a bit back to me, supporting me, and I just, it was a joy working with them and being with them, and of course I loved the music. I loved their work. So being part of all that was terrific, and in the end, of course, it was just an enormous success, and we all got paid, so that's pretty good as well.
It is pretty
Now,
good.
of course, we have to talk about one of the big things, and that's the revenge photo sessions and the photo versus the painting that appeared on the album and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. I know you were at an event recently where you mentioned you thought the photo would have made a better album cover. Is that correct? Did you say that? If not, I'm sorry.
Yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt. You know, I never knew about the painting until I'd shot the picture. And I'd shot two or three other setups at that session, which was sort of quite iconic, and I don't think they were ever seen. And like everything else with Dave and Annie, we got really experimental, and a couple of the things that we tried just didn't work. And I wanted to do this really simple portrait because simplicity for me, if you can make simplicity work for you, then it's always the best. You're going to get the best portrait in a simple way. So, and then at the end, I thought that was going to be the cover. I was really convinced. We had the Polaroids, and I talked to Dave, and then again, I don't remember how absolutely accurate this was, but then there was this guy at the back of the session. We did this in Paris because they were recording in Paris, so I flew over to Paris to shoot the session, and there was this guy there, and Dave just quite casually said, oh, this is so and so. I couldn't remember the guy's name. I've blanked him out. I'm afraid. He might be a really lovely person, but I've blanked him out. And he's going to make a painting of your picture. And to be honest, it was like, it was really quite insulting, and not at all like Dave, because Dave is sensitive to that. He's not an insensitive guy, and so then when the cover came out, I was sort of shocked. And that was that, really. I never worked with them again. We stayed in contact in different ways, obviously, because they both contributed to my book. But for me, it was upsetting. I wasn't happy about it. And I think the fact that the album was called Revenge, and I show the picture in exhibitions, and I'm, I think it's one of the strongest portraits I've taken, really.
I agree.
And I didn't like the painting, and I'll never actually understand, unless maybe you guys can explain it to me, but I'll never really understand why, what the painting had that made it better for a cover than my picture.
Well, you had a very good relationship with them, and I know it was public knowledge that on the prior album they had had some difficulties with their photographer doing some images that they didn't like, and ultimately they went with a video still for the album cover instead of using one of the photographs.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if maybe they were still a little, you know, gun shy from that experience. But then again, they knew you well and worked with you well and liked you. So it wouldn't have been like, well, let's just go ahead and not use this as a photo because we're mad at the other photographer. That doesn't make sense. So I don't know. I mean, that's part of the background of it. I know there was some issues with, with the prior album and the cover with the photographer. But yeah, who's to say? I mean, you're right. That is odd because Dave doesn't seem like the type that would do that. So
I,
I'm thinking maybe it was like an artistic decision that they made and had nothing to do with what happened prior or even the relationship with you.
No, well, there was a tension in the air at that session. Everybody seemed quite tired, and
Hmm.
I don't know. There were problems going on. There were problems between Annie and Dave. I don't know what it was about, and I got the sense that it was Dave's decision to have the painting made. I don't know. It's just water under the bridge. But if we're talking about it, I can quite candidly say that it was upsetting at the time. But doesn't take away from the photograph. In fact, in many ways, it focuses the attention on the purity and the simplicity of the photograph.
I think you hit it right on the head with that. And they
Yeah,
used that photograph for their Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction
I
press. And
know.
I know Dave specifically, wanted that photo or something along those lines. So maybe it's come around and, like full circle, like that's maybe an acknowledgement at the end that, I don't know.
I know. I know. I was thrilled about that when the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame asked us for it. I was absolutely thrilled, and delighted to see it up there. So huge,
Right.
and of course it dominated the room. It looked absolutely wonderful.
Were you at the event, Garrett?
No, no,
Oh, okay.
God.
um,
Mark and I were there, of course.
Oh, were you? Oh, good. Of course you were. Yeah.
Of course we were, yeah.
it was haunting to see the photography up there that large. I think, and this may have more to do with the internet and that kind of thing, but it was years, and I mean years, before I ever knew that this was based on photography and that those photos finally came out and people saw them.
Yeah.
I don't know when it was exactly. I just know it was a very long time. And
Mm,
your whole shoot with that, because there are different photos that come out. There's one, she's got a rose.
yeah.
It's just beautiful photography, absolutely stunning photography.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Again, I have never actually heard anyone that I'm aware of, Dave or anyone, talk about, well, how did this painting come about? And maybe it was just an artistic thing that was part. I know he's got in his, I think at his house in Nashville. I just saw something he posted just the other day, and
Yeah.
in the background is the original painting, and it's this huge thing. It's kind of like a game board almost, but so I don't know how that came about, and uh, but it would be fascinating to me almost that there'd be a special edition of that album where it's the original photography.
If
Yeah.
you think about if that photo was used on the album, how striking that would have been, sitting on record shelves, and not to say the painting wasn't striking either. I think the photo is more striking, obviously. But what an album cover that would have made, huh? It really would have like stood
Yeah.
out. It would have stood out, you know.
Well, that's yeah. Well, that's why I thought. That's why I think I was so disappointed. Not just because of what that they were going to make a painting of one of my pictures, but that the picture would have made such a great cover. But hey, listen, it is water under the bridge. The
Yeah,
photograph
yeah.
is still exists. It's in my book. It looks marvelous in my book. And as you say, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I mean, it was the background to their induction, and I'm really thrilled about that.
Yeah.
Let's read a quote from Dave. Dave also has a nice piece in your book. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but
Very nice piece.
Dave says, "I will always respect Gered amongst others who wear their heart on their sleeve and their eye on the moment. Those moments are rare, whilst battling a sea of traps and snares set to um, set to force the artist to conform to mediocrity and eventually be swallowed by the well." He really loves you. He really loves your artistry. You can tell from that.
Yeah.
Give you a lot of props there.
He said, he wrote, when he sent that across, I was thrilled with it. I thought it was so funny and clever and very Dave and sort of layered. You know, the whale, this great monster that sucks us all in. And and he sent an email follow up, said, "You may want to edit it a bit," which I thought was sweet. I
And
wrote
did
back
you?
and said, "I'm not going to edit anything. I love it." Yeah,
No, you didn't edit.
yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up some of the photographs of some other people in the book quickly because some of them are so striking. Like, there's a photo of a young Phil Collins with
Oh
long
yeah.
hair, shirtless. My goodness, what a photo that is. I mean, I was like, that's Phil Collins? I didn't, I guess, you know, we're just a little bit younger than you, Garrett, but, our Phil Collins was mostly the 80s Phil Collins,
Yes.
not the 60s one.
Well, it's just odd seeing Phil with so much hair, but
Right.
this was one of his first. I think it was the first band that he was in who got signed,
Oh.
and they were called Flaming Youth,
Hmm.
and they'd made this album with some very well-known producers and writers, and they asked me to come up with a sleeve. And they had this idea they wanted to do a triple fold album and create some sort of stained glass window or some sort of image that would be printed on the third page, and you could cut it off or tear it off and put it on your window, and it would, be backlit like glass. So I created a stained glass and photographed the band sort of bare shouldered individually in sort of quite a dramatic way, and then put this I put this stained glass together, and it was printed, and it was one of the most expensive sleeves ever produced, and one of the most disappointing records in terms of sales, not in terms of the music. So that was my first meeting with Phil, and then we became well acquainted through working with Genesis. And he was always very nice. We got on really well, and because of his experience as an actor, he was always good in pictures. And of course, the Genesis that I knew with Mike Rutherford and forgive me, I'm terrible on names. I can't think of the other guy's name. So when it was the three of them, Phil, Mike, and nobody can remember his
I
name.
know it escapes me as well.
Anyway, anyway, Phil's experience and his acting and his instinct would always add a spark to the picture. Always there'd always be that little spark from Phil, whether it was just the shape that he made or the way he stood or the way he looked.
Mhm.
And that's what he would always bring. And the other two didn't like having their pictures taken and were just absolutely not really prepared to work at it. That's it. This is how I am. Photograph me like this, and that's it. Thank you very much. I want to go home. Whereas so Phil would add that little element that would make the picture okay. We got on really well, and we worked together on a couple of things, and then he was doing a solo album called Dancing into the Light, and it was after those very successful albums which had the close-up faces, the monochrome photographs, which were very effective. Talk about simple. And he asked a friend of mine, David Costa, a great art director, and I to come up with some ideas, and we came up with this idea of making him actually almost like a movement blur with very vivid colors. And we did it at a studio near his house in Switzerland. And he was absolutely fantastic. You couldn't have done something like that with somebody who didn't have acting experience and training. And he moved really beautifully and made it all work. And then we went to, I can't remember which tour, we did a whole tour program for him in Florida, which was a great adventure, and we dressed everybody and we did a whole, brochure tour book and everything. So I worked with him on several occasions, got on really well with him.
And just quickly, I wanted to mention two other album covers that you've done that were very striking and meant a lot to me when I was younger. Was the Ultravox second album, the cover of that, and also ABC's Lexicon of Love. What a
Yeah.
photo! What a photograph that is for Lexicon of Love. I mean, that is amazing. But the Ultravox image is so. I mean, it's just they're just standing there. They're all shiny. They've got the neon, but there was something about it that I would stare at it and stare at it. I just loved it. I think it was
Yeah,
the shininess of it and the neon, and it felt gritty, and so yeah, I really like that.
all of that has gone into trying to make that picture, the grittiness, the neon we had made. It's outside the back of the Basing Street studios. I don't know whether we painted the wall. I think we painted the wall. It might have already been painted black. And then I got a load of leaves to put at their feet. I've got a bit of a thing about autumn leaves. So I just threw a load of leaves down to make that a little bit more interesting.
Yeah.
But one of the things that would have got you was that they adopted very robotic poses, very rigid robotic poses. And John Fox, they were all very clever, but John Fox was really clever, a really talented man. And I really enjoyed working with them, but with him in particular. And it was I love doing that cover. So I'm really proud of that cover. I think it's a great cover.
Yeah, I agree.
Beautiful stuff. I should have shown this when we were talking about the tourists, but Annie does have a 2-page spread in her book that just came out in the end of last year. And she says very nice things about you.
Oh, good. I hadn't seen that.
Yeah. But,
Oh yeah.
So, that's the cover of the book.
Oh yeah, I love that portrait. I think that's a great portrait.
Yeah. Mark, show the one of her as a little girl, the very first, because Annie talks about how similar they are in the look and the
Yes.
it's just Annie, 28 years later,
Yeah. Sweet,
Yeah.
chubby,
Isn't that
chubby, windswept, pink-cheeked gal.
Look,
Lovely. Yeah.
let me ask you, it's almost sort of strange to ask this considering the myriad people that you've worked with, but is there anyone that you've not photographed that you've always wanted to?
A good one.
Do you know something? I have been asked that before, and what I always feel, it's not so much the people as there are covers I wish I'd done. That there are shots of people that caught them. There's Dennis Morris's Bob Marley, which I think is fantastic. I would have loved to have worked with Bob Marley. I was a big Bob Marley fan. There's Ry Cooder's Into the Purple Valley. I just love that cover. That was right up my street. I wish I'd done that. I love Ry Cooder. So, that sort of thing happens to me. In terms of artists, I would have loved to have been around the young Elvis Presley, but I wouldn't have done as good a job as the people who were. So, it's more great pictures of great artists that I think, I wouldn't say I wish I'd done them. It's just that they're great, and I would have liked to have done that. I would have liked to have worked with those people at that moment.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You were talking a moment ago about the other guys in Genesis, and it was sort of like, hurry up and get this done. But when you were able to work with Phil Collins or Annie Lennox or Kate Bush, fill in the blank, the people who were already very creative, who wanted to be part of what you were doing and you were creative, it wasn't the drudgery of a photo shoot. It was the excitement of a photo shoot for everyone involved, I think.
Well, I went into photography sort of recognizing that basically people don't like having their picture taken. And if you start from that position, then you know that you're going to have to try and make it an enjoyable experience. And for me, you make an enjoyable experience by making it creative work, which they're part of. Because, you know, for me, there's nothing quite as enjoyable as being creative and working. I mean, that's fantastic. So I would try and bring these people in and work with them and listen to their music, and then come up with an idea that I think reflects the music, you know, and I feel from my previous conversation with them, that they're going to work in with. And usually, you know, I would say 9 times out of 10, I've been right. You know, that it's clicked. Sometimes it doesn't click, you know, that I've gone wrong. I've misinterpreted a piece of music, or I've misunderstood what the artist was trying to say. But usually, then you're working together, and it's a hand in hand, and they're committed. They come to your studio. It's a day's shoot. You know, you're going to be with. It's not. That's why I hated going backstage and taking pictures of people for a magazine. There are photographers I know who are absolutely a genius at that. You know, they can pop their head round the corner, bing, bang, bash, come out, and they've got a marvelous picture. I don't know how they do it. I just don't understand it. And I've tried to avoid those situations because I'm no good at them. And I don't feel as though I cannot work in spite of my subject. I've tried, and it doesn't work like that. I find it very uncomfortable photographing people in the street. I feel bad about it. I want to go up and say, Mac, you know, can I take your photograph? And would you mind, you know, I want to involve them in what I'm doing. I can't just shoot them. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody's got their different way. Yeah. Well, is there anything you'd like to add that we've not asked you about David and Annie, or your photography? Anything we've not covered?
No, not honestly. Not that I can't think of anything. I mean, other than to say that the fact that they're both such important artists. Annie is so powerful still, not just as a performer, but you know, as a spokesperson, as a woman. You know, that's fantastic. That's moving. You know, I feel inspired to see, and I know that my daughters and my wife, you know, feel that as well when they see her. And I think Dave has just continued to be the most interesting and creative musician, and I'm full of admiration for both of them, and thrilled that I had the good fortune to work with them and to share those numerous lovely moments, those happenings, those lovely moments.
Well, I'm going to show the book one more time.
Oh,
and it comes out in about a week, right, Gered?
May the 12th, is that?
May the 12th, yeah.
Yeah, gosh, it's
And
May.
it's definitely worth picking up. Wonderful photos, not only of Eurythmics, but all these other great artists.
Oh, thank you.
Amazing. And I will be picking up a hard copy as well. Thank you for the digital, but I want a hard copy too. So I'll be getting that and looking forward to it.
And thank you for, as I said at the beginning, this was a long time process in finally getting things together that we could all do this at once. But it actually came out at a good time that we were able to do it, and your book is coming out, so that works out really well. And it really was a pleasure to talk to you. Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We're flattered that you joined our podcast.
Well, I've enjoyed it very, very much. And thank you for asking such great questions and creating such a lovely atmosphere for us to have this podcast. And no technical faults.
Right. How about that? That's great. That's very nice of you to say that. That we created a nice environment. That's nice to hear.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Okay.